Hey everyone. Today we're going to talk about mental health at the workplace. Welcome to Invincible Innovation Live Show. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm Mazor, Kario, product innovation and value creation expert. And I have a wonderful guest with me. Hi, Craig.
Hi, good to see you.
Craig Fearn is the Global Wellbeing Sustainability Expert. And I'm sure we're going to have a really interesting talk. Craig is globally recognized Mental Health and Wellbeing Board member and CEO, leading transformational program which place people well-being within business strategies for global corporations and private clients.
Yeah. Wow, that sounds really important. Can you read that again?
and even, I could do that. But more importantly, and this is like the first time for me, Craig's birthday is today. So happy birthday, Craig.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I get younger. I'm kind of like Benjamin Button.
Oh, I'm on the other way, but tell me how you do. We're live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook, and you're so invited to join the discussion and ask questions. And now we can start. Like we're talking about the serious subject, but I think it demands some kind of open-hearted conversation, and it may be a bit of humor, although it's a really important topic. So why mental health is so important for businesses today?
It's a really good question. Mental health, mental well-being has been obviously around for years and years and years. It's not a new phenomenon. It's just something that we're actually starting to take seriously, put a proper name to. We're talking about age. My age is such that I can remember that the days where you would sort of say that your mental health wasn't very well. And I can remember my parents telling me, just what are you talking about? You're a kid. Your kids don't have
well. Of course.
And it's sort of continued through from that point of view. And I've been working in this field now for the last 15 years or so, in different roles, different places. And I sort of started down this road with businesses before it was really cool, in inverted commas, to want to look after your staff. I was kind of the guy that was knocking at the doors of these businesses saying, hey, you really should be doing something about this, and kind of being chased out by the dogs down the
This weirdo came again to talk. What is
He's got this crazy idea about looking after our staff. We just don't know what's going on. Business is a place where we spend so much time of our lives. Now, whether we're employed by someone, whether we're a solopreneur, whether we're a startup business, work becomes at least half of our more than half of our
I would say more, because if you're working about 9 hours and you have like traffic time going and coming back more or less, and you have like about 14 hours awake, I think it's like 2/3.
Yeah, indeed. And I think the thing is, it's kind of weird that we say, why is mental health so important for business? Because actually, if we're in work most of our life, well, why isn't it? It's kind of the other way around. Businesses, if we're giving so much to a business, we're there so many times, of the day, to act the old sort of attitude of, well, I pay you a wage and that's it. That's my responsibility to you. I give you money, you do a job, and that's just the way it was. And even going back further and further in history, we didn't have scenarios, unless we were talking about sort of the Industrial Revolution and things like that, where people were put through these really poor workplace conditions and bad sort of things. And we like to think that we've eliminated most of these in terms of sort of the physical health of the employee. So, the amount of time you're allowed to work during a day, or the amount of, physically what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do, your health and safety regulations, your sort of all these kind of things. But what never sort of came to the forefront was actually what it was doing to people from a mental point of view. Now,
and I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's because we're so appreciating our minds, because like when you have an employee, you get his mind, you get his, like, this is what you get, his cognition abilities, and sometimes if you're a worker, maybe you get his body to do something, but you don't even think about the fact that you're getting a whole person with a heart and a soul, and it's all for you when he's your worker or employee.
indeed, because you're paying for them to do a task. So in your mind, the only thing you're paying for is whatever it is that's doing the task. Obviously, we leave the rest of it at home and we forget about it until we go back and pick it up again. But, I spent so long sort of going to businesses and fighting that fight. So the whole sort of, look, your staff members aren't numbers, they're people, they're individuals, they have hopes, dreams, aspirations, they have families, they have lives, they have all these other sorts of things. And I never got anywhere. And I used to get shut down. And the biggest question that I was always asked, in fact, one of the first questions I was always asked when I would go into a boardroom or I would go into is, what's in it for us? What's in it for us? If we treat our staff better, what's in it for us? Now, immediately we've removed the human argument, which says, well, we just generally shouldn't be going out and doing nasty things to people.
No, like capitalism doesn't work this way.
Well,
right?
this is the point, isn't it? So immediately, what I had to start doing was sort of rebuilding, and it's really horrible to say this, but it started becoming a sales pitch. So you actually had to sell a business on the idea of looking after their own employees, or sell a founder on the idea of looking after themselves, which was even more remarkable.
Yeah, I take care of my business. I make lots of money, and I go to Hawaii once a month or something, or a year, or whatever. That's what I'm doing.
That's it. I'm sorted. Thank you very much. Sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I was watching a documentary the other day that said, on billionaires. So billionaires who had built from the ground up. And it was surreal, because the interesting part was that we, without that type of money, we kind of sit down the bottom of the ladder and we kind of look up and we go, oh, they've got it made. We're the ones working so hard. We do X, Y, and Z. And it was so intriguing to sort of see the world and the life of paranoia and distrust. And, they were interviewing these people and they're like, look, we've got security 24/7. We're never alone, because somebody might kidnap my daughter. Or, there was the people are only my mate because I'm rich and they want my money. So you've now got no friends. So
what is the name of the movie? I have to show it to my kid.
It was a documentary. I will find I'll find the title for you so you can put it with this.
I put it on my
please.
It
was just something I happened to catch as I was flicking through, and it was so interesting to me, because what it proved is, whether you were at the top or at the bottom, there was a mental implication in what business was doing. So whether you were the guy at the top who had all the money but was really, really worried about everything that came with the money, so how do I keep the money, how do I stay successful, or whether you were the person at the bottom who was like, well, how do I make the money, how do I go out and do what I need to do. And there was this constant sort of, people are CEOs. I do an awful lot of work with CEOs and sort of directors of companies. And it's a very interesting sector to work in, because loads of CEOs sort of sit there and you say, okay, well, you've got all these things in place for your staff. Do you use them? And they're like, well, I don't use them. Well, why don't you use them? Well, because if I use them and someone finds out that I'm using them, then it's the CEO of the company and there's blood in the water, and people are going to start circling my company because I'm weak. And, in the corporate world, we can't seem weak and we can't put ourselves out there. From a founder's point of view or a startup's point of view, you ask the same question and the answer comes back, well, because if other people see me struggling, they're going to question my decision to become a founder, a startup. My mother, my son, my wife, all of a sudden start going, is it worth it? Is it worth seeing yourself go through these types of things?
And maybe I would ask myself some questions, right? It's not only people around me. Maybe I would find out what is the price of being a CEO.
But if I bury it and I pretend it's not there until it explodes, I'm all right with it. I can just tick along.
What do you mean when it explodes? Like when I'll be so tired I couldn't do my job?
So effectively, you can't. Mental health is something that so many of us for so long, we have swings and roundabouts in life. It happens. And there will be a day where we have good mental health. There'll be a day where we have average mental health, mental well-being, that hasn't gone as far as sort of a depressive episode or an anxiety episode or something like that. And these will happen every single day.
Sure.
But if they keep happening and we keep pushing them down and they keep happening and we keep pushing, in the end, the hole fills up and then we can't hide it. It's like putting things into a suitcase. You can only put a certain amount of stuff into the suitcase until the suitcase won't shut. And then it's like, oh no, what do I do? And a lot of people go, well, you go out and you become more resilient. That's what you do. You take a resilience course and that will put everything right. And you're like, well, resilience courses are great. They're absolutely phenomenal if you know why you're doing them and what the reason behind them is. So to give you an example, I had a potential client ring me a couple of weeks ago and said, look, can you write me a resilience course for my staff? And I said, sure, no problem at all. Why? And he said, well, because they're going off sick with stress. I was like, oh, why? And he said, well, we've had a problem with some of our orders and we've had them working treble shifts. And I said, oh, okay. Didn't you want to start there? And he was like, no. I just want the resilience course. I said, okay, so just to read it back, what you want me to do is write you a course that you can try and use to make your staff more resilient to the unreasonable workload that you've put them under for the last 2 weeks. And it's like, well, yeah, that's what resilience is about, isn't it? And it's like, no. And thanks for giving us a ring and everything else, but I'm not I'm not going to be doing that.
It's so funny. Sometimes people are trying to solve something that is like obvious for them, but they don't want to have this solution. Maybe it's too complex. Maybe they don't want to handle it. Maybe for them it's like it's not my job to think about their mental health, to think about their capabilities. But I am going back to the fact that you needed to persuade people to talk to you. Maybe today it's less prominent in your work, but we have these numbers that people that are less stable and happy in their work, they would go sick more, for example. And sometimes it's not really being sick because they just want a time off and then they just don't come. Of course, it's related to engagement and the fact that you're getting less creativity and less people wanting to do things. Like there are numbers to productivity in the end, right? So we have these numbers.
We do. And again, this goes back to my whole, if you like, sales pitch that I would go into companies with. So, numbers can be very, very dry.
Yeah.
But they do speak to board members and they especially speak to the financial, so the CFO and the guy on the board that's the accountant who is obsessed with trying to work out these numbers. And don't get me wrong, these are great people. They're there to do a job, and that's the job they're doing. So they're there to try and work out how this is going to benefit them. And for example, the types of numbers that come out in the US last year, $1 trillion was lost to mental ill health in the workplace. $1 trillion. That effectively wipes out, debt for most of the planet. We're talking numbers that are astronomical. $1 put into a mental well-being, mental health strategy returns 4. You tell me somewhere I can get that type of return on my money, and I'll put my savings there tomorrow. Quite happily. It's this whole sort of more staff leave companies because of toxic workplace environment than they do any other reason, even pay. So if the workplace is toxic, people won't just stay because of the money. They will leave. They will get up and sort of walk. And of course, then you've got the impact of having to replace that individual. So you go out and you retrain somebody to do that. But you've got to first of all
find the right person.
Yeah. So you've got to find that person. Then you've got to train that person. Then you've got to give them so many months for them to bed themselves into the company. And of course, if the workplace culture is toxic, by the time this person's gone through 6 months, which is probably what it's going to take to get them to a place where they're going to do something, they're just going to turn around and walk anyway. So, we sort of ignore these really, really big warning signs. Your staff going. Well, so many people do exit interviews, but how many people do stay interviews? Why are you staying with my company? Well, because you treat us really well, because you do this, because you do that. But you could also be doing this. This would be really good. Once you're doing an exit interview, it's too late. They've gone. They're going somewhere else.
Yeah, of course.
So, this is the bit that we forget when we're a sort of a business and we're trying to talk to business about well-being in the respect that the financial argument is overwhelming that treating staff right, looking after mental well-being, looking after the well-being of your employees, whether a startup, a founder, a FTSE 100, a billion-dollar company, which is why so many companies sink so much money into well-being offering.
Yeah.
And there we have the next problem. And the next problem comes because you have lots of people who want to say they're doing something, but don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So they just spend
money. That's what I wanted to ask you. What does it mean, well-being? I could tell you from the tech industry in Israel, right? This is where I come from. So they have so much, benefits, and they have ice cream in the office, and they have someone coming and doing yoga lessons, whatever. And they have all of that. Sometimes it's even too much because you're looking for in the next place you should have more and more and more. And it's what does it really mean in well-being for a person?
So the interesting thing in that question is, again, for many, many years, I've been campaigning against what I call initiative-based well-being. So initiative-based well-being is things like, well, today I'm going to have yoga on a Friday. And then tomorrow, on Monday, we're going to do a course on mindfulness. And then that's it for the next 6 months. And then we're going to have an ice cream on a Friday. And then we're going to have a da-da-da-da-da. These are all initiatives. So these are all, and businesses have become really, in my opinion, really over-reliant and seduced by the quick fix nature of an initiative. So an initiative turns around and says, this is a really good thing to do, and I'm going to come in and do it. And you're like, yeah, sure. As a one-off, that's a really good thing to do. Mindfulness, brilliant. Absolutely fantastic. Do it right. Really, really good. But if you only do it once and then someone disappears, or they come in and they teach a course on how to do mindfulness, and then you never go back to that, it's pointless because you've only had this one-off lesson on X, and then everyone's... So for me, it's about the culture of your business. So what we should be looking at is strategies, so strategic-based well-being. And well-being in terms of mental well-being. So if we think of... So mental health, you can kind of think about on the same sort of spectrum as physical health. So, every day we kind of fall on that line. So today, Some of us are fitter than others. Some of us sleep better than others. Some of us eat better than others. We all do lots of different things. In the same way, mental health will have different challenges during that day. So some day we'll be stressed because we've got extra work to do, anxious because we're being told that we've got to come on a podcast and sort of talk about mental well-being. Mood changes happen, things like that. And these will all happen on the same sort of as a physical health. When we talk about well-being, we're kind of talking about our everyday sense of well-being. So the overall day, not the specifics within the day, but the overall. So how was today? How was, rather than this caused me an issue because of this, this, and this. And it's where, for example, I think the next big issue to the workplace will come from, and that's burnout. And because burnout is technically the only mental health condition that's diagnosed purely on workplace characteristics, it is only affectable through the workplace. So it's not something the employers can send you away to sort out, because it's not like we'll take 2 weeks off sick and then come back and your burnout should be gone. Well, no, because my burnout was caused by the workplace. So unless you're prepared to change the culture of where we are and what we're doing, I'm always going to be coming back here and having these issues. And that's where strategy to me trumps initiative, because initiative puts the emphasis on the employee to go away and learn mindfulness or remember everything on this course or whatever else. And it's the quick hit, quick fix solution that, business loves, because it says, okay, I only have to, if I can get 50 people in a room and I pay you £400 sterling to come and talk to that room, I divide 400 by 50. Oh, all of a sudden that's actually quite appealing. And I can tick a box then and say, wow, wasn't that great? However, if I've got to change the direction of my business, if I've got to look into what we're doing wrong, if I've got to find out where this toxicity is coming from, and we've got to make changes within the business that then reflect down to the workforce, that's us as the business having to change rather than the emphasis being on the employee. Now, the employee is part of the business and obviously will have to move with the culture swing. But it isn't where you're separating the two and just saying, well, actually, there's a really, I was reading a report from the McKinsey Institute on Friday. And basically, there's an incredible quote that says, I've never known anyone mindfulness their way out of a business problem. And that's effectively what I've been saying for years, which is as part of an overall strategy, absolutely amazing. Get your ice creams on a Friday. Get your mindfulness workshop on a Wednesday. Encourage people to talk to mental health first aiders and things like this. Absolutely marvelous. But if your company culture is toxic, if your company culture is to drive people constantly past what they can cope with, if your company culture is to, give people low workplace satisfaction, if your company culture is to exhaust your employees, it doesn't matter if I'm getting an ice cream on a Friday. I'm barely standing, I'm that tired, but I'm going to get an ice cream on a Friday. So everything's all right. It doesn't work like that. And that's why I've been pushing the whole workplace strategy over workplace initiative as a way of dealing with mental well-being.
But what you're saying is, it seems much more complex to handle. After all, this business is people, and the people are much more complex than having a solution or initiative or a project or whatever. And to make sure that these people are more aware of what's going on around them, and maybe being more attentive to other people, and to have less pressure or less stress within teams, to have nourishing managers, instead of like, this is so much more complex than bringing ice cream, I guess. And it's
Yeah.
so hard to handle.
And that's
What
the
you're
point.
saying.
You see, again, this is the next side of the equation. Because it is harder,
It is.
people don't, people are always drawn to the cheapest, most cost-effective, quickest way of dealing with something, even if it doesn't deal with the entire problem.
Yeah,
So
it's not only the quickest, or maybe it costs more even. I
yeah,
think it's connected to the fact that people don't want to change. It's really hard, right?
yeah, well, change is always difficult, and we make so many excuses as well to sort of combat the idea of actually, we should be doing something a bit different.
Sure.
And there's always the sort of, we've always done it like this.
Yeah.
Oh, the amount of times I've heard this, and it's like, but it wasn't right then. It's still not right now, and it won't be
Yeah.
right tomorrow. So let's change it. Let's do something. And to be fair, there are places that are getting better. You mentioned the tech industry. Now, small startups from younger individuals who are growing their companies are bringing with them more ideas, more sort of more tolerance towards the idea of doing things the way that we know now is more effective. And that's absolutely brilliant, because they're coming into this space and people are going to work for them and they're staying there. And now all of a sudden the established companies are kind of going, well, hang on a minute, all of our good people are leaving. This how have they put it out there, the great resignation, or
Yeah.
something along those sorts of lines.
Right.
Now, for me, there's a couple of reasons behind that, but one of them, or the major one for me, is how suddenly people have realized they don't just have to sit there and put up with what they've always put up with.
Right.
So they're going, again, there's a classic example where I was contacted by a company just at the very start of the pandemic in the UK. So this is when we were going on to our furlough scheme, where the government was paying the wages of the employees who were furloughed. And this company came to me and they said, look, we've got, and this was in the hospitality industry, so we've got X amount of people. We're thinking of putting them on furlough, but I'm not convinced. What do you think? And it's like, well, furlough doesn't cost you. You're putting it on there. They're going to get paid. They're going to look to you and go, brilliant, what a great employer. You're looking after me, da-da-da-da-da. Well, it turns out they didn't put their staff on furlough because it was going to be too much hard work to fill out the papers. So they just left their workforce high and dry, effectively.
Wow.
We then come to the end of furlough, and they wrote to all their previous employees, and they said, hey guys, fantastic news. We're allowed to open up. We're a hospitality business. We want people are going to be coming to us. Da-da-da-da. We're allowed to go out. Isn't it brilliant? Come back to work. Come back to work on your same pay, same conditions, same this. Not more than 5% of their total workforce came back.
Wow, 5%.
Yep.
It makes me happy to think about that.
It was for me. Yeah. I was sat in the background going, "Well, I told you."
What did you think?
Well, I have to say it was very hard not to do an "I told you so" kind of.
You didn't.
I didn't, and the reason I didn't was because I take no pride in seeing people have issues. That isn't
no, of course, but
it was their argument. Their argument was fundamentally flawed. It was, we can, and in a way, where I am in Cornwall in the UK, we've done this a lot in history, where we sort of go, people will come and work regardless. They need money. They need what it is. We're a low-paid economy, hospitality. We can, hospitality-based. We can effectively just open the doors at the start of the summer and everyone will flood in, and that's the way it is. And, it didn't work. And it hasn't been working since. even if you go into the big cities like London and Manchester and Birmingham, and even if you go abroad into the big cities, Paris and Munich and places like this, are all struggling to get these staff back. And the reason they're struggling to get these staff back is because the staff have said no more. I'm going to do this.
So you started talking about the Great Resignation, but let's go back to the pandemic itself. These 2 years, people working remotely, some of them were fired, some of them got dismissed, and then they came back. So mental health during this crisis, how do you see the impact of that?
Mental health during the crisis is something that's been hidden by, in my opinion, by an awful lot of our policymakers and sort of things on those sorts of lines. We've been, it's kind of like the magician, the sleight of hand. If you're looking at this one, you're not looking at that one. And ultimately, we've had all these big things that have come out, massive. The COVID pandemic was terrible for so many businesses, shutting down, couldn't do X, Y, and Z. But in the background, we constantly had this rumbling mental health boulder that was just picking up more and more people. And ultimately, that boulder is going to stop at some point. And all these people are going to get flung off, and people are going to have to pick up where we are. And this is why I was saying previously that I think mental health is the next. It's always been a thing. It's always been a massively underestimated thing. But for me, these numbers that continue to come out, now that a lot of people tried to explain it away due to COVID. So they sort of said, oh yeah, productivity levels were down. Well, that's because we didn't, we weren't all in the office, and we weren't all working from home, or whatever the case might be.
Yeah.
There will come a point where people have to accept that actually these things are real and they're causing issues. Whether these are individuals who were abandoned by their company and then unfortunately have not been able to get work again and don't know what to do with their lives and have been put into a really difficult situation, or they're people who need that workplace company where we go in and we have that human interaction, and because of COVID and things like that, they've not been able to get it. So they became very isolated. And of course, along with isolation, you then go into the sort of, depression, anxiety scale, possibly. So these guys are going to be coming back together. You've got teams who have been apart for years and years and years, who are now suddenly thrown into a room together and told, yeah, just go back to the way everything was.
Yeah.
It is... For me, it's this big sort of it's like we've come to the end of something medical, and now everyone's kind of going, right, guys, let's go back. Yeah, everybody back. It was a bit of a storm, but it's blown through now. So we're all just going to go back in the office, and everything's going to be great. Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. I think the concept of hybrid working and things on those sorts of lines has advanced during this period. And for some people, and I emphasize some people, it's a good option. And again, you also have to be part of an industry that can support it. There are lots of people out there just banging the working from home drum. In fact, I was talking to somebody recently, and I said, well, we've got lots of farmers where I live. Sorry, you're telling me they can do all that from a computer? No, they need to get out in the field, and they need to do these sorts of things. Fishermen, builders, the construction industry, house builders, retail shops, all these aren't. There is a select percentage of us who are fortunate in the respect that we can do what we can do remotely.
Yeah, but I think it's like a majority that most people manufacturing, we talked about hospitality, we talked about travel, all the things that in the real world, what people really need to build something tangible, they cannot do it from home. Someone who is working in a manufacturing facility, what would he do? In the end, it needs to be something. It needs to create something, right? So it doesn't make sense to see the world only from a virtual perspective. And I come from tech, so I know exactly what it means. And even if we could do it, should we? Would it be good for everyone?
That's my biggest concern. And this is the biggest sort of not anti working from home, but look, there are lots of different things that are good about working from home. There are lots of different things that are bad about working from home. For me, I always end up with a list of jobs for my wife that says you need to do all these things before I come home, which is never great.
Which is really, really bad. You have two employers right now.
That's it. But the other side of that equation is I'm a people person. I deal with people on a daily basis. My whole life, my job, everything that I've created for myself is around looking after individuals. Yes, it's based in strategy as much as, other stuff and looking at different ways it's done, but actually it's to benefit people.
Right.
So I like going to visit people for a coffee. I like going into the office of a business and feeling what the culture's like, because that's something a computer program can't do. That's something that, that's experience. That's something I've spent years and years and years being able to sort of bring to the table. It's not cold. It's not disconnected. It's that whole sort of scenario of the fact that, do we want to live our entire existence online? Do we want to sort of, do we effectively want to go to the whole sort of Wall-E concept? Where we're just being maintained by a couple of robots in a ship as we're flying around the universe and everything's virtual. Personally, I like real life. I like being able to go and, as I was saying earlier to yourself, I like being able to go to places, to feel the culture, to understand the needs of a business that I'm going into, because every business is different. And the culture of every business is different, and every nationality is different, and every continent is different. And, just to sort of sit in an office behind a desk and it's kind of, I liken it to the sort of Simpsons episode where he's just pushing the Y key the whole time, why, and you're like, that isn't me. That isn't where I'd want to be. And actually, it's not where I'd want my son to be. I've got a 10-year-old son, and coming out of the pandemic for him has been horrendous because of the interpersonal skills that he's lost.
Yeah,
and I still now go to face-to-face meetings and people talk to me as if I was on camera, and it's that weird disconnect where people think they can actually get away with speaking in a certain way because you're on camera, you're not right there in front of them, so it removes that sort of that personal responsibility. And they use language that they would never dream of using if you were sat in front of them. But the camera removes that interactivity, and let's be fair, as humans, we're pack animals. We've grown up to be around other humans. So yes, I support remote working to a point.
Yeah, I have to tell you that I totally understand what you're saying. Most of my life I've been working here at home, but I went to my clients at least 2-3 times a week. I would go to Tel Aviv area, wherever, and meet my clients where they are, and to sit with them and to really listen to them and see what their workplace is and the interaction and the politics, which is influencing what you're doing, whatever, and just understanding that. And even the drive, you have lots of traffic in Israel. So I have time to talk with my friends and to listen to a podcast. And there is sun outside most of the time in Israel. And it's like, this is what you need as a person. Like, we're human beings. We need, as you call it, a pack. We need a group of people. We need to have the interaction. We need to go outside, right? Just see the sun, feel the wind, walking. We're not only these eyes in front of this square. We need to go outside and feel the tangible feeling of our senses. And if we don't get that, which is so basic, just walking on the ground and hearing the birds and seeing the sun and meeting people and maybe even other animals, right? It could be the birds and see the cats on the street, whatever. If you don't have that, how would you be in a good mental health? You couldn't do that because you're not meant to do that.
You are completely correct. And that's why I support it with caveat. So my caveat is, at the end of the day, a couple of days at home working, fair enough. But if your entire working exists, even if you're a programmer, let's be fair, there's loads and loads of tech companies that employ remote programmers who are all over the world. For me, when I was working in that industry, especially over the pandemic, the first thing I said to the companies that I was working with, how much contact do you actually have with these people who are remote? And they were like, well, every morning. And I was like, okay, great, every morning. What do you talk about? Work.
Yeah, the task is for today, right?
Yeah. So okay. So this person, let's say, lives on his own in a flat programming, or he lives with his wife and his kid, or whatever the case might be. The only interaction he ever has with his business is, morning, Craig. Did you hit target yesterday? No, I didn't. Well, can you work harder today then? Yeah, okay, good, brilliant. Well, I'll speak to you tomorrow. Okay, any issues? No, of course there are no issues. I'm not going to tell you even if there are, because you don't care. You only asked me about work.
Yeah, of course.
And that was the biggest issue that I found, sort of from the remote working perspective, was the only time these people ever interacted with anyone was in a work bubble basis. So it wasn't like, they had a healthy sort of, let's have a chat about anything other than, because if I was in the office, I'd have gone to make myself a cup of coffee. Bob from accounts would have come in and we'd have sat and talked about the football results and had a drink and just talked about whatever we wanted. Or, I'd have spoken to you and said, oh, how are things going at home? Have you rebuilt the whatever? Or you have that small talk, that gossip, which is so intrinsic to who we are as individuals.
Yeah.
Gossip is what humans do. We love interacting and talking about stuff. That's great. But if you remove that ability to keep up to date with everything that's going on, if you've removed all of that sort of, and then there were people who were coming on and saying, I never leave my computer when I'm at home. I sit in front of my computer the whole day. And I'm like, why? Well, because I'm at work.
Yeah, it's meeting after meeting. It's so strict,
But if you were at work, you'd go and make yourself a coffee. You'd go to the toilet. You'd go for a lunch break. You'd go away from your desk because you didn't want to sit at your desk the whole time. You'd gossip with somebody over the way. You'd go and, have a cigarette break if you smoke or whatever it is. So these people, for some reason, had it in them that, they had to stay rooted to their computer. They weren't allowed to go and do any of these other bits and bobs. A company came to me and said, will you get on board with us uploading Keystrike software to our employees for their well-being? And I said, well, how does it monitor their well-being? They're like, well, we get to see how many times they're pushing keys. And then we can see that they're working. And that doesn't monitor their well-being. That's going to terrify them. Oh my God, I've not hit enough keys.
Maybe I should just press the delete again.
Well, you get the Y button, like the Simpsons again.
Yeah.
But it was, it's that whole sort of, if I'm away from the workplace, how do I prove to my employers that I'm productive? How do I prove that I'm, and actually, that speaks to me of a poor workplace culture in the first place, because your employee is going away feeling that they have to, make sure that you guys are feeling they're doing their work. Not that they're secure and they're feeling safe and they're feeling looked after because they're doing their job. And the amount of companies that I went through this big, long, I'm going to call it conversation. It probably was much more argument than conversation, but we'll say voices were raised on and I even put caps in some of my messages. So, it was getting a bit tense there where I started to, use bold and underline and stuff.
Yeah.
But that was the point. The point was that the overall culture of the business wasn't such that when people were working away, that they felt empowered to work away. They felt worried that in actuality, they weren't, that they were going to be judged as not working as hard or not doing as many things. It was, and again, that's why I'm split on the concept of sort of home working and things like that. I think in certain cases it's a brilliant solution to a lot of problems, but I think it needs to be monitored correctly, used correctly, and sort of put forward correctly. As far as mental health during the pandemic, give it another year for things to sort of iron themselves out a bit more. Mental health has been on the rise for years. And, the pandemic certainly isn't going to lower that trend.
No.
It's just going to put people maybe into slightly different boxes. Burnout has suddenly become a lot more popular, where people are sort of saying, my workforce is suffering from burnout, but actually a lot of people don't even know what burnout is. It's just another one of these words that people have started to come up with. Well-being, yet again, another word that people don't necessarily understand, but they label everything. It's like if you look on the internet at the moment, if you go on LinkedIn, everyone is a well-being expert.
Really?
They became one overnight. They all of a sudden put expert in front of their name. Although I know lots of marketing experts popped up during the pandemic, everyone became an expert.
Yeah.
And it became, when I do my strategy pieces and things like that, a lot of the time I sort of refer out to other people. So within the piece or whatever, I can't do everything. So, if they need mindfulness, then I'll refer to someone I know is really, really good in that particular area. And I was contacted by a lady relatively local to me, about 100 miles away. And she said, I understand that you do X, Y, and Z. I was like, yeah. She said, I've got the perfect thing, and I'm hoping that you'll be happy to refer if you find the need. And I was like, yeah, sure. Tell me about it. And she said, I've got 100 rabbits. I said, great. 100 rabbits. And she said, yeah, what I want to do is I want to take them into an office and just leave them there. Because everyone loves rabbits.
Wow.
And that will cheer everyone up. And I'm thinking, 100 rabbits in an office, to start with, you'll probably go home with 300 rabbits. But next, think of the mess that goes everywhere. And them diving in underneath computers. And, and another woman...
And chewing all the wires, right?
So somebody else wanted to fill an office with balloons so that people popped their way to their chair and then could sit down and do their work. And, I'm like, I know two people who are terrified of balloons to the point of a proper phobia. And I'm thinking, if they saw balloons in the office, they just turn around and go home. They wouldn't.
Yeah.
So,
and more than that, I'm thinking about the rabbits. Rabbits don't like when they're being held and hugged, although we really believe in that. And I'm thinking about the rabbits first. But everybody has...
There'd have to be a health and safety thing done to all these rabbits running into the office.
I guess that there are some better things to do about being health aware than bringing the rabbits. So we're almost done. So I have my last question. What is your number one tip for leaders today?
My number one tip. I'm going to give you two because I'm generous.
Rabbits.
Rabbits. That was going to be the first one. That's really unfair. Stealing my jokes.
Yeah.
So the very first one is to not try and do. If you don't know, find someone who does. So at the end of the day, any business that's looking to move and change its culture or do something, if you really don't know, find somebody who does. Don't just randomly start bringing in what, because all you'll do is keep spending money and then regret the fact you've spent money on well-being, and then well-being becomes a taboo within the office. The second thing is your workers are people. They're not numbers. They're not spreadsheets. They're not payroll. They're people. They have hopes, dreams, aspirations, and some of them will be absolutely amazing. Some of them maybe not. But you owe the same duty of care to every single person that comes into your organization, including yourself.
Right. Yeah. So I think we have most of the questions that I meant to ask were not asked. So maybe we should have chapter 2 with our discussion. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure just talking to you. Where could people hear more about what you do and contact you?
Sure. So find me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to have a chat. I think I'm Craig.Fearn1 on LinkedIn. One. Yeah, I don't know why there's a 1 because I've not found another Craig Fearn on LinkedIn. But
You're number 1.
I am number 1. Okay, I'll go with that. And I also have a website, lighthousementoring.co.uk. You can find me there as well. But LinkedIn, I'm most active on, and certainly try and reply to anyone that gives me a shout there. Yeah.
So Craig, first, thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I never had this very long discussion. I think it's the longest one that I had till now, and it was like I didn't feel like the time even moving. So it's been really fun talking to you. Thanks, Craig, for your time and your experience, and just engaging with you is lots of fun. So I guess it would be fun for people, leaders, CEOs, just to talk to you and listen to what you have to say. So thanks.
No, thank you.
And to all of you change makers out there, thank you for joining us. If you want to learn more about what I do, go to invincibleinnovation.com, and I'll see you next week with another innovative, insightful talk. See ya.